today I have my mentor on the show, Eric Perez. He is one of the people that has changed my life. I know so many of you guys ask me so many questions about where I've learned all these things and who are the people that have impacted me the most. And so I felt it was an honor to have my mentor and my teacher here, and pretty much a brother and an awesome person. So would you like to introduce yourself?
Well, thanks, Jenny, for that. That's awesome. She set the bar really high. I hope I don't hit my head on it. I'm Eric Perez. As Jenny said, we're friends, we're family. Jenny was a student in the high school where I've been teaching English, Central Islip, for 25 years. And when I met her, she was a senior. She was 18 years old, and she had a thirsty soul, I could tell. And she was on the fence as to what kind of a person she was going to be, but she knew that there was something better for her. I believe it was just divine providence that brought us together. Had less to do with me and less to do with Jenny. It had to do with, the greater purpose and the greater energy, which is God. And I just shared my thoughts with her, my beliefs, my experiences. And if you've learned from Jenny, if you've gotten anything from her, it's coming, from her own soul coming through. As a teacher, I just try to guide and show her some new ways of thinking.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
So this whole interview, the reason I set this up is because one of the things that I struggle with in the beginning of my path is understanding how everything is connected. And I feel like Mr. Perez, Eric, how he connected everything for me. And so the goal today is to be able to kind of illuminate the connection between God, religions, and a little bit of science. And so I want to start off by, how did you start your path?
I think probably we're always on the path, even when we don't know, because you know as well as I the wrong turns that you've taken are what illuminated the right paths. But without getting all esoteric with that stuff, I always had a feeling there was something bigger than me and that I was connected to something. Billions of people have felt this throughout the eons, there's no doubt, because we do come from a divine source. For me, I think my bigger awakening, because there's probably many little ones along the way, was maybe 22 years ago or so. I was in a place where I had done everything that I was told would make me happy once I had done it. So I had a college degree, I was pursuing my master's, I was renting a really cool house in the woods, I lived with my best friend, we had dogs, I had a beautiful girlfriend, had an amazing teaching job, making money.
Awesome.
And I still felt empty somehow. And it's one thing to not have the things that you want, that you think you make you happy, and not be happy. And it's a whole other thing to get those things and still not be happy. And that kind of scared me. So I think it was that yearning and that emptiness that, prodded me forward to seek. And I think one of the couple of turning points, one was, and they always do with literature, because I'm an English teacher and I'm a reader and a writer, had to do with, it was a book that I saw in my house that my buddy had borrowed. And it was The Way of the Peaceful Warrior by Dan Millman. Great book. If you haven't read it, guys, go get it. It's a beautiful story. It's really, really inspiring. It's an enlightening book, and it might give you the shift that it gave me. So I read that book, and it just turned me on right away. And I felt little bells going off, like, wow, this is truth, and this is what I've been looking for. So that kind of spurred it. And then what really sealed the deal was I was in my friend's room hanging out, now my brother-in-law, Greg, and he had a little book of Zen, what's called koans. They're like little phrases, they're paradoxes, they're meant to stimulate your thinking, get you to get out of your mind, in fact, with excessive thinking. And I was just looking one little quote at a time. I actually have my own copy there. And that one really was powerful. It was kind of just hitting little parts of my brain. I even, my consciousness. And I said, bro, this is off the hook. And he says, put that down, I got something for you. And he went, he got a tape cassette of, tape cassettes is what, for those of you who don't know, I don't know how old your audience is. it's what CDs used to, it became CDs and now they're all digital. But he got a tape cassette of Deepak Chopra reciting chapters of the Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita, for those of you who don't know, is a perennial book of wisdom from ancient India. It takes place as a conversation between God and his great disciple right before a great war takes place, a great spiritual war. So just hearing those verses, it stimulated something in me. And I had never heard it before, at least not in this lifetime, but I knew somehow I had. And the only thing I could tell people, it's like falling in love. It absorbed me. I got pulled in. I was immersed. It was like gravity, sweet, beautiful gravity.
Beautiful.
And that's what it felt like. And so that pulled me into thinking about my place in the universe. You know, what's death? And, you know, who am I really, if not this body, right?
Yes.
And so I just got set up on my path then. I started reading hundreds of books and meditating with yogis and with gurus and practicing meditation and practicing yoga. And I made it to India at some point. And you know, that's where I am. I'm still on the path, still seeking, still working.
So I have a question. So when you said in this lifetime, so what is it that you feel happens after we pass away?
You know, obviously every spiritual tradition has its own understanding of it. I think there is a truth, and truth is not, it's not subjective, but none of us knows everything.
Right.
This is my disclaimer in case you didn't pick up on it. So I think that the soul leaves the body. At that moment, the being, the person realizes that they weren't the body. And if they didn't believe that before, they know it now. And it could come as a shock. For people who did believe it, it's this glorious confirmation that there really is no such thing as death. Only a transforming of one's being, of one's vehicle. I think the soul leaves, and then there's probably just infinite places for the soul to go based on how it's lived its life here. And I believe that this earth and the physical universe is a school for the soul. And through time, through compression, through suffering of experience, and through love more than anything, the soul learns, it evolves. And based on your karma, which is the things that you've done and the result of the things you've done, and things you failed to do, as well as the thoughts you thought and the words you've spoken, all that comes into the play of karma, that decides and it determines where your soul goes in the next life. You can come back here and be reincarnated to learn new experiences. I believe that there are other places, other spiritual planets, other dimensions that we can go. There's even a quote in the Bible where Jesus says, in my Father's house there are many mansions. And so he's referring to that in the universe and in what exists, there's plenty of places where we can dwell as beings.
Oh, that's beautiful. Now, do you think we ever stop reincarnating?
Yes. Once we learn the lesson completely. Not just intellectually, but once it just we become it.
It's like a knowing.
It's just a knowing. It's a silent knowing. Again, like falling in love. Yes, if you have kids or if you don't have kids, but just think about somebody you love very deeply. And if somebody were to ask you, prove to me that you love them, you couldn't.
Yeah.
And what's more is that you don't even feel the need to. You just love for love's sake. And yeah, that's what I think.
When I started on my journey, I was really afraid because a lot of people were telling me that it's only one way. And when I met you, you were able to connect for me how everything is really just about love. And so I'd really like for you to share how you came to the conclusion that it was about love. Like, what was your journey to figuring out that God is love?
I think one of the most important things is the experience of it. I've often said, and it might be an unpopular statement, if not even a confusing one, that I can't wait for the time when we no longer have faith in God, but rather just the knowledge of his existence and how we're a part of him, her, whatever that is.
Yeah.
Because faith is seeing and believing, not seeing but believing without seeing. But you don't have faith that we're having this conversation. You know that we're having it because you're having the direct experience of the conversation. That's what I think the world needs, is that experience of God. That being said, I think it was just, and maybe I should have prefaced everything with this, I think it's through the grace of God and of Guru, which is to say great spiritual teachers, that you even come to this place. And sometimes I feel like I'm Neo in the Matrix, where information is just being downloaded to me by no virtue of my own, but that I'm just being given a gift. And I consider a gift, and I consider it to be my understanding, and not the end all be all of truth. But in my experience and in my belief system, there are love is the path. And if you read every great spiritual doctrine really closely, whether it's the Quran, whether it's the Bible, Old and New Testament, whether it's the Buddhist sutras, whether you're reading the Bhagavad Gita, whether you're reading the Vedas, whatever it is, love is the ultimate experience because God is love. And we're made with love, by love, and for the purpose of love. You could be convinced of that as you start living this way. Once again, it's that feeling like you just know. They call those things axiomatic, those things which are self-evident. And once you have the experience, it's self-evident. Again, like falling in love, it's all about the love. But because of the existence of the human ego and how dense the ego has become on this planet with the human race,
right,
it's just so very easy for people to think that their way is the only way. We have a lot of social unrest right now. The things that people are protesting against are things that do need to be protested against and things that need to be fixed. The respect and the giving of dignity to all people, regardless of anything. That's what people deserve. But we're living in a time of great ignorance. And so the abuse of people is a sign of that ignorance. The overreaction to it. People are using this as an excuse to misbehave, equally as ignorant and still coming from the ego. So I think that the message is that we need to start unifying ourselves under a common principle and not a political party, not one religion per se. And I don't want it to be a unified religion. I think each religion is there because it suits the different psycho-emotional palettes of individuals. People are born in a certain time period in a certain region of the world. There are certain cultural biases, and there are certain experiences that those people have had that makes them receptive to the law of one, the law of God, a very specific way, because God is infinitely gracious and patient and loving.
yes,
He makes sure that he can approach us in a way that we can receive him.
yes,
And that's why there are different religions.
yes,
Anybody who misbehaves in the name of religion is not actually religious. They're more fanatical, and and they're following their own rules and they're following their own laws, and they're just using the name of religion. I'd like to encourage everybody, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. It has become very trendy to say, well, I'm a good person, but I don't believe in anything. That's not healthy either, and really it's intellectually lazy, and it can lead to moral laxity. Because without structure, without some sort of discipline, it's hard to start doing the right things, even if you do have a good heart. I'll liken it to, you want to get in shape. So you're kind of going to work out once in a while, and you make it to the gym once every 2 or 3 weeks, and you're going to start eating differently, and you have a salad once every 2 weeks, but the rest it's pizza and fries and fast food. Because you lack that discipline, all you have is a belief system of health, but not a practice of health. I think it's good to have a practice of spirituality, and just understand that it's not necessarily better than anybody else's. It's just the one that suits you, and that you should practice it while not tolerating other people's, because tolerating implies you still don't think it's right, and I'm just going to be gracious and accept your ignorance and the fact that you're heathen, but rather that we just embrace other people's understanding of what their purpose is here. And if we disagree, we disagree, but we do so with love.
very well said.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
You mentioned practice. What are some practices that you do that help you stay in alignment with what you believe in?
I'm an English teacher, and I'm a reader and a writer. So words is what I have in this life. I can't fix my car necessarily, but I'm grateful to all you mechanics who do have that intelligence, because we need you just as much as you need me writing things. But I think for me, reading, finding the right books. You all won't see it, but there's 8 books there. There's a book here. There's a couple of 100 here. I'm a voracious reader, so finding things that inspire you, and there is something out there for you to read. Practices. Yoga is huge for me because I want to be fit, and I'll be 50 in February, so I find that it's a little trickier to stay fit. Before I could eat what I want and do what I want, didn't make a difference, but now everything is sticking, so I have to work a little harder just to stay in semi-shape. But yoga is not only a great physical discipline, but the word yoga, ancient Sanskrit word, means union or oneness. So what yoga does is it allows you to unify your mind, your body, and your spirit, to yoke them together so that you're an integrated being. once you're whole, then it becomes easier for you to start connecting with others and bringing them into the fold until everything is ultimately one again. Truth is, everything actually is one already, but we have the illusion of separateness. So I guess what yoga would do is that it dispels the illusion of separation. And what we see is what was always there to begin with, which is the fact that everything is connected, that we're all one and we're all in it together. Meditation is huge. And a lot of people have this misconception that meditation is, sitting in full lotus, mountaintop chanting Om, which is cool. You could do that too. But I'd say, focusing on your breathing, mindfulness. It's really about mindfulness. It's taking the time to be present. So, Michael Jordan, great basketball player. His coach Phil Jackson was a practicing Buddhist. And
oh, didn't know.
He was. And the story that I heard, I didn't hear it from Michael or from Phil because I'd never met them, but the story that I heard was that Phil Jackson had told Jordan that great basketball had nothing really to do with basketball, which of course sounds a bit self-contradicting.
Right.
Illogical. But the idea is that when Mike was, eating at home a few hours before the game for energy, he shouldn't be focusing on anything but chewing on every morsel of food as if it was going to be his last. And then when he was driving to the game, that he should be 100% focused on the road. And then when he was in a locker room lacing up his sneakers, he should lace up his sneakers like Michelangelo would sculpt.
Just be in the moment.
In the moment, deep, immersed. And then by the time he got onto the court, he didn't have to get his game face on. He didn't have to switch. All he had to do was stay in the moment still. So I think that's the key. It's about mindfulness. Because so much of our pain, in fact, I'd say the vast majority of it, is coming from traumas from the past. Yes. It could be neglect, yes. It could be abuse, right? It could be fear that we experience, any of the things that happen to us, and yes. We all have our own stories. Each one is as valid as the other, but we get so stuck in the past that it's like we're shackling ourselves with these invisible, ethereal chains. Because they're really nothing more than their mental constructs, their memories. And that's not to invalidate anybody's suffering, but the truth of the matter is that if we always hold on to the past, it's like every year that we hold on to, every experience, it's like putting another brick in your back. And that's why people are hunched over in the world, is the weight of the world is upon them. Wow. Because they're carrying so much weight. Meanwhile, the moment has more than enough to keep you occupied. And I think that the yoga and the meditation and the reading, watching videos like the one Jen makes, finding other spiritual teachers, I think that helps to lessen the burden. So I'd say those are some of my practices. And I'll throw one more in there. I think this one is huge, especially these days. Selfless service.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
We're here to help each other.
Yes.
And these days, there's a lot of people who need help. There are people who are hungry. There are people who are homeless. There are people who are living in mansions who may as well be homeless for how destitute and how impoverished they are spiritually. There are people who are suffering, and it gets worse and worse, it seems. But we are here for each other. So I think if you volunteer at a soup kitchen, if you have an elderly neighbor, check on them, shovel their driveway when it snows. There's a way for you to serve, using your time, using your talent, using your resources. Whatever it is that you have, find a way to use it to make others' lives easier.
Yes.
And because of the law of karma, and not that you necessarily want to do it for this reason, but because of the law of karma, everything you do for somebody else, you are doing it for you.
Yeah.
It comes back. And in some cases, tenfold, 100-fold.
Yes.
Because the universe is a generous place, as long as you are being generous also. And I find that when you start doing good things, God sees that, the universe sees that, and says, yo, this girl, Jenny, every time I give her something, she shares it, whether it's a piece of knowledge, whether it's extra money, whether it's an opportunity, an insight, right, a moment of enlightenment. She just shared the thing I gave her. She needs more now. And it just starts increasing, and pretty soon there's just this beautiful flow, this perfect divine symbiosis that goes on between you and the universe, between you and creation. And it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing to experience. So start serving others, guys. Don't make it all about you.
It's almost like being responsible with what you've already been given.
Exactly. It's a good way of putting it too. It is a responsibility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. You said reading is one of your practices. So,
mm-hmm.
How has reading open your mind to understand God and the universe and help you make it more real to you?
Again, because my natural abilities and the things that I've worked on have to do with language, right? That's what my skill set is. My natural proclivities have to do with language. It's for me, it's one of the ways in which knowledge and wisdom get in. You know, you and I have done a lot of yoga together. We trained at the same studio and got certified in the same place, Satya Yoga. And there are different paths of yoga.
Yes.
In other words, different ways in which we can unify ourselves with God again.
Right.
And again, God is so gracious that he creates multiple paths to suit your individuality.
Yeah.
So there's Bhakti Yoga, which is the yoga of devotion. Those are for people who have so much heart, right? And you all know somebody who just got all this love and they're hugging and they're kissing and they're just so happy to be around and to be alive. That's the yoga of devotion to God. And you know, you cry when you think about how blessed you are. And those are Bhakti yogis. There are Karma yogis, which is the yoga of action or the path of action, service. My dad's a good example of that. My mom's a good example of that. These are people who are always trying to help. They're always, let me do the laundry for you. Let me make you dinner. Let me do this. And their job in this universe is to just be serving others. And that's how they enter the kingdom. And then there's Jnana Yoga, and that's kind of what you're referring to. Jnana Yoga is the yoga of knowledge. It's the yoga of wisdom. So you basically are pursuing the divine using the intellect. And that's why reading scripture, whether it's the Bible, whether it's the Buddhist sutras, I'll be doing, you're all invited actually, it's free to do. I'll be doing a book club, Jenny comes to them. We'll be reading The Alchemist every Wednesday for the next 4 to 6 weeks. We'll see how long it lasts. We're doing it on Zoom. We'll be discussing the book. But it's essentially, I read books that light me up, that inspire me, that open my mind, that really offer and foster new perspectives. And one of my favorite teachers, Wayne Dyer, one of my favorite quotes of his, Dr. Wayne Dyer, rest in peace, Brother Wayne. Wayne Dyer said, when you change the way you look at things, the things that you look at change. And when you analyze that quote, that beautiful piece of wisdom, you realize that reality isn't something that you're living in, but rather something that you're creating. So, we could have light, right? Light comes down from the sun. And if you have a prism that's cracked or that's smudged, the light that it refracts and projects is also going to be somewhat distorted. But if you have a perfect crystal, a perfect prism, and the light hits it, then you're going to have a beautiful rainbow that's created in essence. So the light is the light. The light is the truth. But your mind, your perspective is that prism. And if you have a distorted perspective, if you have faulty understanding, if you have too much anger, too much resentment, too much fear, then the light's still going to hit you, but it's just not going to come off the same way. I heard the yogis used to say that the sunlight falls equally on a piece of coal as it does a diamond. Mm-hmm. But it's the pure qualities of the diamond that allows it to reflect the light.
Mm. Wow, I love that.
Thanks.
So I like to think that you are one of the scientists in my life.
The scientist?
Yes.
The English teacher scientist?
Yes. That has really taught me a lot about how science and God are really correlated. I know that there's a lot of different theories out there where they think that it's just religion, and people are afraid that science would, get rid of religion or make it invalid, and vice versa. So what are some of your theories, or some of the things that make sense to you in terms of connecting God and science?
That's a good question. I would say, first thing I'll say is that, if you have a pendulum and, you pull it far one way and you let it go, the momentum is going to carry it far the other way. Right? So it goes back and forth. It swings equally both ways. So if we go back, centuries, and we go back to when the church, ruled a big part of the world, the church wasn't the problem. The problem was the egos and the darkness of heart of the people who had assumed control. And they used the church as one of their vehicles. It wasn't God, it wasn't Jesus who did it. It was bad people doing bad things in the name of these pure beings, in the name of God. But a church took control, and then we had the age of reason coming in. We had this, guys like Copernicus and Galileo, these great scientists who were, pursued and imprisoned and ostracized and threatened by the church because their scientific findings were flying in the face of what the church had established was truth, even if it wasn't truth. Right. So, we had this, again, the pendulum, we had this extreme, use of religion as dogma and not truth. And then we had the science took hold and it went the other way. And then people only started believing in that which could be seen, which could be measured and detected. A lot of the world is still there also. People have very little understanding of what science has actually discovered, but they just listen to what the popular narrative is, which is always that which is projected by the rich. The rich decide what we hear, right? You're watching the news, you're misinformed, right? Some people, if you don't watch it, they say you're uninformed, but if you do watch it, you're misinformed. But I think, and I think that's what's happening now. People are polarized. But I do think the pendulum eventually finds its center. Yoga, for me, has allowed me to close the gap between the two. Truth is truth. And if you pursue it with the heart, with earnestness, and if you pursue it with the mind, with earnestness, you'll find the truth. The Bhakti yogi uses the heart more than anything. The Jnana yogi uses his mind and his intellect. But you have to use both. Khalil Gibran, who wrote The Prophet, talks about how every human being is like a seafaring vessel, a boat. And if you have a heart and you have a mind, the heart is like the wind in the sail, and the mind is the rudder, which guides it. If you have all mind or rudder and no heart, no wind in the sail, all right, so you're pointed in the right direction potentially, but you're not going anywhere because you need that heart impetus to push you forward. But if the inverse is true and you have all heart and wind in the sail but no intellect, well, now you're flying on the ship.
Oh man!
But you're reckless. You have no real direction. You're going to end up crashing on the rocks and sinking the boat. It's really by combining the two. Yoga is really the ancient science of that. It's the science of realization, of self-realization, and God realization. So great, true scientists, and a lot of them today, I think, are shills. They're people who have been put in place to spew, falsehoods. A lot of atheistic, so-called scientists. And I say so-called because, even according to Einstein, atheism is completely illogical. There's too much of a set design to creation to imagine that it was haphazard and random.
Right.
The universe could not be as perfectly designed as it is by itself in a random fashion any more than a wristwatch that you find in this buried in the sand was made by nature. We know that it was designed. We know somebody had to make that watch because it's designed. The universe is a huge, creation, beautiful, intricate, perfectly designed. So there is a higher power. So these scientists, the great scientists, guys like Einstein and guys like Oppenheimer and all these great quantum physicists, they've discovered things about the nature of reality which don't make it into never makes it on the news because the news is here to misinform and to keep us at a low vibration of fear, right? Culture of negativity. They could put the good stuff on, but they don't. They put the negative. That's intentional, and it's with consciousness and awareness that they do so. That's what that is. Nevertheless, many great scientists, they split the atom, right? Or even before, they split a molecule, and they took the molecule as the smallest thing, and then they find atoms. Well, we can't split an atom. This is the smallest thing possible the atom has to be. And then they split it. And they find there's a nucleus with electrons and protons and neutrons revolving around it. Well, they've kept on splitting, right? And this stuff doesn't make the mainstream, sect of knowledge, but they kept splitting. And they find strings and quarks, which were these really sub infinitesimally small microscopic, forms of matter. And they got eventually down, and my understanding is that what they found was, and we're talking about infinitely small photons of light that were blinking, flashing. but they were blinking and flashing so quickly that they gave the illusion of being solid or stationary. So if you want to think of it this way, imagine having watching the propellers of a plane, or if you have a fan in your room and it's got 3 blades. When you first hit start, the blades are moving so slowly that you can still see the 3 individual blades. But after a while, it starts moving so quickly that you can no longer see the space between them, and all you see is a solid disc. So the whole universe is constructed of these photons of light that are blinking so quickly that they're creating the illusion of solidity. So there's a lot of cool books on it. The Holographic Universe is pretty dope. The Tao of Physics. Yeah, I know.
Whoa.
That's what happened to me. Every time I look at these books, I'm blown away. So it's really, this is like a holographic universe. And what feels solid is actually electromagnetic repulsion. I mean, look, you could have wind blowing at you so hard that you can't go through it. It creates a wall, even though there's nothing necessarily solid there other than atmospheric pressure pressing the air, which is what creates wind. So electromagnetic repulsion is why things feel solid. It's this vibration. The whole universe is a word. The whole universe is a vibration. Pythagoras said that a stone is frozen music, frozen sound. So when these physicists find that, and then so you learn these things, that everything is light, and then you jump back into the spiritual doctrines, and you have in the Bible, and the Lord said, let there be light. And it wasn't the light of the sun he was talking about, because I think that's day 3 in Genesis. So I could be wrong. You can correct me if you want in the comments. But certainly that the sun and the moon were created later on. So what are we talking about with light? It's the light of consciousness. It's the light of awareness that goes on, that God creates outside of himself. And then there's a vibration, and that vibration begins to coalesce into like an ether. And then the ether could become gas, then it becomes liquid, then it becomes solid. But at the foundation of it all, everything is sound. Everything is frequency. Everything is vibration. The Bible says in John chapter 1, verse 1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So what is that word? A lot of Christians will say it's a mystery. I say that I don't think it's any longer a mystery. The word is Om. And you know, if you ever hear your refrigerator go on, you turn on your air conditioner, any really machine, there's that, you know, Om, and then you get the vibration of the machine running, the energy running. That's what every atom and subatomic particle in creation is doing. It's vibrating with consciousness. And that's what allows it to exist. It's the creative principle. And interestingly enough, like I have the Om tattoo, but when you write Om in, you know, a Roman alphabet, it's A-U-M, Aum. And that is etymologically, which is to say the roots of words, it's etymologically linked to the word Amen. And in Arabic, right, and in the Muslim faith, they say Ameen. People have heard it. In the Bible, Ezekiel said he heard the voice of God, and it was like the sound of 1,000 rushing waters or something like that. So he heard the rumbling, he heard the energy, he heard the Om. And the beauty of it is that it's the science which is corroborating what these ancient beings, these ancient spiritual texts have said, without the benefit necessarily of scientific instrumentation, through their own meditations, through their own inner laboratory, because that's what it is. Yogi uses the inside, the spiritualist, I should just say the yogi, but a true seeker is going inside to find the universe. And that's what they heard. They heard the sound of God as being that which sustained them. It's the thing that's holding the earth. It's floating in space. It's what's creating the gravitational pull between all the planets around the sun, and then the sun itself is revolving around another central point. And I mean, it's really magnificent. And if you really think about it, then the sun, with the planets revolving around it, is a macrocosmic reflection of what's going on inside of us. Because the atom has the nucleus in the middle, which is the sun, and the energy and the gravity of it pulls in the electrons, the protons, and the neutrons like they were planets. So as above, so below. Yeah. And it really is all connected.
Wow.
There is one truth. There's one blueprint, and it could just manifest itself, macro and microcosmically. But the truth is still the truth, And these books and the science, and I've been reading David Wilcock lately, who's really a brilliant thinker. Ancient civilizations and sacred geometry and quantum physics. He's really learned in all those different disciplines, and he brings them together really well. And I would encourage you guys, keep seeking it. And if you're not into science, that's okay. Science is not your way in. It doesn't have to be. I needed to read it because of just who I am. But there's truth to be found.
Wow, you're brilliant.
I appreciate that.
My eyes were getting watery from hearing you explain the entire universe. Thank you for that. That was amazing. I do want to wrap it up by asking you, I'm going to say some phrases and I want you to finish them.
Okay.
First one, life is
wonderful.
Our purpose is defined by
how much we love and forgive.
Wow. It's beautiful, bro.
Thank you, girl.
Really feeling that right now. Last one. The reward is greater than the sacrifice when we...
The reward is greater than the sacrifice when we... That's a good one. I want to think about that one.
Keeping you on your toes.
When we offer it up to God.
Wow, bro, you're really good on your toes.
See that? Like jazz, girl. I'm improvising.
Thank you so much for
being on the show. You're welcome, Jenny. My pleasure, guys.
So again, this is Eric Perez, my mentor, my teacher, my brother, just an amazing human being, a great soul, someone who's always giving back to the community, an amazing teacher who's inspiring like countless students in Central Islip, where I'm from. Shout out to CI. And is there anything that you'd like to leave off with? Anything you'd like to say or share before we close off?
You know what? I'll say one thing. The world is in a really precarious place. This is, and you've heard it probably said many times, so I don't want to make it more white noise, but we're in an unprecedented place in human history. And, we have all this going on with the pandemic. There is something going on. I don't think anybody's 100% honest or sure about what exactly is happening, but something is happening. We understand that. And then we have all this social unrest with the Black Lives Matter movement. And then we have all these things going on with the trans community, and everything just seems so confusing. This is what I will say. Black lives obviously matter. Because those souls that happen to be incarnating in bodies that have more melanin in their skin, because that's really what it comes down to, are just as beautiful and precious as any other soul that's ever walked the earth. So is every soul that is incarnated in a pale white-skinned body and in a brown body and whatever it is. The reality, my friends, is that none of that matters in the ultimate sense of truth. Black in and of itself has no value. White has no value in and of itself. Puerto Rican, there's no value in that by itself. There's beauty in it, and it can be celebration and embracing of the culture, and nobody should be ashamed of who they are. But the value of a person does not come in their skin. The value of a person comes in their heart and their soul. Your value can never increase as a human being, ever. Because the second you were born, you were already of inestimable value. And I'll say that the same is true for the trans community. We have all this going on, and there's this fighting, and is a man a woman, is a woman a man? Let me say this, that's all irrelevant in the greater scheme of things. Because a person who is straight, gay, bi, there's no value in that either. Whether you are a man identifying as a woman identifying as a man, if you're a man who believes you're a soul incarnating in a body for a limited amount of time. And you're beautiful however you are. Now, the reason we have these movements is because the ego of the human race sees different as being other and dangerous. And it's fear-based. Yes. And so with fear, and when fear becomes unresolved, it becomes anger, right? Anger is always that secondary emotion. Yeah. And then anger, when unchecked, then can turn into different types of violence. And that's unfortunate. Every human being deserves equal rights, equal treatment, regardless of who they are, regardless of sexual orientation, skin color, but that's not what's happening. And so these movements have become necessary. But what I would do is I would encourage all of you who are angry about this and who are protesting and all that, continue to protest, no doubt. If you feel that's your calling, if that's your dharma, if that's your contribution to this, then that's what you are going to do, because that's what you're being summoned to do. But do not think for a moment that the answer lies just in those protests. The answer lies in our spiritual transformation. We don't need better laws. The people in charge want to make us think that we need better laws. They are who they are. They are the 1% of the 1%. They are disconnected from us in their behaviors. At the soul level, we're all one, but not in their minds. And they're going to have us thinking that we are just also different and also separate. The truth of the matter is that every soul is connected. Every soul is equally beautiful. But when things are not treated as such, if people are not given those rights, then yeah, we do have to speak up. But remember to go into your protest with the spirit of love. Because, and Dr. King said it, light can only drive out the darkness. Yes. And that only love can drive out the hate. Keep that in mind. When we react violently, we've lost the fight. We've lost the fight. Yes. Anger, it's okay to feel anger, but it's what you do with the anger that matters. And anger can be alchemized. It can be transformed into this beautiful, divine, all-encompassing love that is courageous and can fight when it's necessary to fight. Because when darkness rises, it's the responsibility of every spiritual warrior to get into the fray, to get into the battle, and to wage spiritual warfare, intellectual warfare. But the problem isn't white people or black people or cops. The problem is the ignorance, the evil that exists in the human heart. And everybody has a little piece of that. Foster the light within you. Do not attack physically. Defend yourself if you are attacked, but do not ever instigate physical violence. Because when we do that, we lose. We start a fire that encompasses us all. Love is the only thing that's going to release us from this. And God is love.
Beautiful. Well said.
Thank you, Jenny.
There you have it, folks. Remember, be a blessing this week. Make healthy choices. I love you guys. Thank you for tuning in.
Namaste. Peace.
Namaste.